I'm Reverend Amani Malaika, for those of you who do not know me, and welcome if you are new. I'm so happy to have you with us today. Welcome to our beloveds online. I am so happy to have you with us today as we celebrate Kwanzaa. And as we look at the framework, the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, is a framework. And what I've discovered is that it is a framework for living the core principle of science of mind, the core principle of all faith traditions and teachings across the world, the principle of oneness. And so that's what we're going to dive into today. And as we begin that dive, we're going to hear from our Leadership Council president and his husband, Jay, on Kwanzaa. Thank you. And you can check your screens.
Hello, fellow Albuquerque Center for Spiritual Living members, and happy Kwanzaa. I am so happy to share with you what Kwanzaa means to me. It means first fruits, and what that means to me is that it's the fruit of the continent of Africa that can be shared with the rest of the world. And so I invite you to that 7-day celebration.
And hello, Albuquerque Center for a Spiritual Living family. Kwanzaa to me has always meant opportunity. I didn't really understand Kwanzaa for a while, and then the more I began to see how we can share, how we can explore each other and explore our community and what it means to be together in community, I love it. So Kwanzaa is about exploration and newness for me.
Thank you, and happy Kwanzaa.
Happy Kwanzaa.
Yes, thank you. So one of the things that it really got me thinking about this framework that Kwanzaa and the 7 principles provide is the frameworks that have been provided to us throughout humanity from all of the great teachings, right? The framework of the 10 Commandments from Judaism that continued on into Christianity, the framework of the Tao Te Ching, the framework of the Vedas and the Sutras that became the Bhagavad Gita, and the frameworks that we continue to develop as they become needed. And all of these frameworks over the history of faith traditions and philosophies have risen in a time when they were needed, based on what was happening circumstantially. So Kwanzaa rose in a time when the African American people in this country had enough, and needed something to rally around, much like when the Vedas stopped working for the Hindu people and they needed the Bhagavad Gita. Much like when the Jewish folks had enough and they needed some commandments to rally around. And so these frameworks aren't necessarily rules handed down from the white guy in the sky. These frameworks rise from the oneness through our expression as divine beings because we need them. We need something that's like, I kind of know that this oneness thing is true. I kind of know that there's something greater. I don't really know what to call it. I don't really know how to access it. And I don't know how to live it. And so these frameworks rise. And so this framework, the framework of Kwanzaa, is wrapped around 7 principles. And as I was looking at these principles, and I was looking at the alignment that they have with science of mind, the faith tradition we practice here, and with all faith traditions, I was looking at a framework of how we, if we so choose, could look to these principles as a how-to practice oneness. The first principle of Kwanzaa, which begins today, and it is the principle that is focused on in the practice of Kwanzaa, is UMOJA, translated as unity. And in the Kwanzaa practice, it is to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race. But what do we know about unity in the science of mind teaching? As the second step of our affirmative prayer or science of mind treatment. is we unify ourselves with the principle of oneness. We unify ourselves with the recognition that there is only one holy, blessed one. And if there is only one and there is no separation from the one, then it is within and as and through me and you and you. So this practice of unity that we value in science of mind might look for, striving for, and maintaining unity in the family, community, nation, and race. Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind, says, "The furtherance and evolution depends upon our ability to sense a unity with nature and her forces. When the knowledge of this unity comes alike to all, the tread of armies will cease and the bugle call will echo the soft notes of humanity's love." That sounds like the same unity to me. What about you? And when we bring that unity, that oneness into action, which happens to be the mission of our community, love in action. So when we bring unity into action, how does that look in our families? Kwanzaa asks us. How does that look in our community? How does that look in our nation? And how does it look in the entire human race? This is a framework that UMOJA offers us. The next principle in Kwanzaa, self-determination. To define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. Ernest Holmes says, "The aim of evolution is to produce a person who, at the objective point of their own self-determination, may completely manifest the inner life of the spirit." When we define ourselves and name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves, I would call this unification in action. Because when we know what we are as divine emanations of the One, then it is our duty. It is our duty to claim that knowing and define ourselves as a divine emanation of the One, to name ourselves a holy, blessed expression of the One, to create based on this reality, and to speak this truth in every action of our life. And in the context of Kwanzaa, in the context of this self-determination, this was about taking back our power. No longer allowing outer circumstances to define who and what we are and how we are named, what we are called. Reclaiming the truth of who we are from the misunderstandings and misbeliefs of the outer world, of the conditions. That what do we know in science of mind about condition? Might be real, but it sure isn't true. There is a greater reality. There is a more true reality that says there is only one, and that one is present right here and right now through my very breath. Which couldn't possibly mean that I am less than. Which couldn't possibly mean that I am separate from you. So when we take this principle of self-determination into action, we unify ourselves with that oneness, and we live it. We live it as if it is the only reality determining who and what we are. I call that self-determination unification in action. Because if we are determining who we are, how we name ourselves, what we call ourselves, what we allow others to name and call us, if we determine that based on the outer circumstance, if we determine that based on history, if we determine that based on cultural norms, we are out of alignment with truth. We have stepped out of unification. We have stepped out of self-determination. If we are just reacting and resisting, then we are still allowing outer circumstance to determine who we are, what we are named, what we create. But when we claim the one power, the only power, the power of the Holy Blessed One, when we claim that as our nature, as the only possibility of our nature, well, then self-determination becomes pretty darn easy, yes? I don't care how long you have been marginalized in society, and whatever society you may have found yourself living in. There is no greater power than the Holy Blessed One's power. There is no more present or omniscient or omnipotence than the Holy Blessed One. So when you take yourself back, all the pieces and parts of your story, of your history, of what has been handed down to you, and you take all that back and align and unify with and determine for yourself what is true, unshakable, unbreakable, unharmable. What do we know about God? What do we know about that Holy Blessed One? Can we break God? No matter all the ridiculousness we do to one another and we do to this planet, can we break God? Anybody? No. And if there is only God, and you consciously choose to unify yourself with the unbreakable nature of God, are you breakable? So does it behoove you in your self-determination to continue to tell the stories of your brokenness? Does it serve you to continue to practice a spirituality of less than? Thank you, Kwanzaa, for reminding us that we have the right and the responsibility of self-determination. Third principle of Kwanzaa, UJIMA, collective work and responsibility. To build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and solve them together. I call this realization. Oneness made manifest through collective work and responsibility means that oneness is not just a cute little quote we're going to hang on our wall. Oneness is not just a value we've got printed on our website. Oneness is an endeavor that requires our labor, that requires our hands and our feet and our bodies. We are in flesh on purpose, so that we can actually live and practice these incredibly beautiful and true principles. So UJIMA, from the Ernest Holmes papers. If anyone knows anything about the love that is all-embracing, their arms will be around everyone in the world. It is all nonsense to say God is love unless our arms are around the people. It is all nonsense to say God is peace unless there is a peace in our own consciousness that brings calm to everything. It is nonsense to say God is giving unless our hands are open that we may scatter on the four winds of heaven the last atom of good we have ever received. It is all nonsense to say the universe holds us in its loving embrace while we dislike one single soul. This is what UJIMA means when you practice science of mind. This labor of oneness means that we don't just pretend that we like one another. We don't define who gets to be within the embrace of love based on our skin color, based on our class, economic status, based on our location. If we say that we believe in the principle of oneness, in the mission of love and action, it is nonsense until you include the whole of the one in that love. And until you do the labor required to wrap your arms around that much humanity. Because humans are hard to love sometimes. The history of what we have done to one another, the current state of what we do to one another, is hard to love sometimes. And yet that is the labor. That is the work of inclusion. One of our favorite buzzwords right now, right? DEI. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. But do you really want to include everybody? Like everybody? For real. And until you can, your labor is not done. And that includes yourself. That includes the recognition, realization, and unification of the self as a beautifully, on purpose, divine emanation of the one. We have to make that real. Our own oneness with the one and our collective oneness with the one. And I don't believe that work will ever be done in my lifetime. So if you think you are done, I'm pretty sure you're mistaken. But that is what collective work and responsibility means. So I'm going to bring it back to UJIMA, to build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and solve them together. Like, break that down for a minute. We are building and maintaining community together. How many of you like to actually shut up long enough to hear the other person's perspective and make room for the wisdom in it? Right? When you are quite sure you are right and they are wrong. And not only do we have to build community with everybody, we also have to take their problems into our own lives. Because as much as we are lovely, beautifully intended humans, we like separation. We like that little bit of distance we can have from their problem. We like being able to say, well, I prayed for her. I put her in my prayers. But I'm going to leave it over there. I'm not actually going to bring it in the house. Right? What would it look like if we actually collectively took responsibility for the ills in the world, for the ills in our neighborhoods, for the ills in our city. That until everybody's housed, we have not finished our work. Until food insecurity is obliterated, we have not finished our work. The labor continues, and it is our problem. It's not their problem. Each one of us has a role to play, a responsibility to take in the community that we build together. And until we do the work of UJIMA, which is not only growing our awareness, it is growing our responsibility and our labor to meet the problems that we share. And then we also have to listen to other people's ideas about how to solve it. We also have to be willing to come to the table with perspectives and differences that may boggle our minds. How do we do that? We determine that we are one of the Holy Blessed One, and so is everybody else. And we make it real. And what I have found, it is in that labor, it is in that community building that it gets real. It is when we get off our couches and our lotus cushions and get out into the labor and the work of building community that we begin to make real this concept of oneness. It is the gift of the labor and the responsibility itself that brings this principle into reality, which is ours to do, right? The third step of affirmative prayer of spiritual mind treatment is realization. Realization defined means to make real. It is ours to do to make these principles real. And I believe it's not until we get our hands dirty that they get real. Right? It's not until we step outside our bubbles of what we think we know and are comfortable with that it starts to get real. The fourth principle of Kwanzaa, UJIMA, cooperative economics. To build and maintain our own stores, shops, and other businesses, and to profit from them together. That's a big one, y'all. Have you lived in the US long? We literally have a law. We have a law that says corporations must be profitable. And F all the people who are in the way of that. We got a lot of work there, this whole cooperative economics thing. Ernest Holmes from The Science of Mind says, "My opportunities are unlimited. There is a divine urge to express. It permeates me and fills all space and all people. All of my affairs are in its hands. To it are clearly visible the best ways, methods, and means for my greater expression. I leave my affairs in the hands of this principle, and I cooperate with it." What that says to me in cooperative economics is we must be willing to let go of what we think is economic success. We must be willing to break the law in order to live in harmony with the real law, the law of oneness, the law of unification. And if we are going to make that real, we got to break some other laws. We got to break some other traditions. We have to break some awfully comfortable ways of being, yes? And cooperate with the one truth we call ourselves beholden to as people who live spiritual lives. And I'm going to hand this over for a minute to Dr. Stephanie McIver, one of our community members, who is going to talk a little more about the law of UJIMA and cooperative economics.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie McIver and a friend of Albuquerque Center for Spiritual Living. My family's been participating in this church community for many, many years. Happy holidays to everyone. I'm here to talk about the fourth principle of Kwanzaa. So in the Nguzo Saba, which are the principles, the fourth principle is UJIMA. UJIMA is cooperative economics. And I chose this principle to share with you today because it's been critically important to me in certainly the past year, certainly the past few years, this concept of cooperative economics. And what it means is that we need to recognize that the economic well-being of the least of us reflects the cooperative economics or the economic well-being of all of us. So we need to be highly conscious of where we are putting our resources, how we are spending our resources, to whom we're giving our resources, our financial resources in particular, and whose endeavors we are uplifting. Some of you may have heard that the economic well-being in the Black community is tremendously dire. Across the nation, Black families have a net worth, shockingly, of $5 on average. You heard me right, $5. That is in comparison to the Hispanic community, where the net worth is thousands of times greater, and the white American community, whose average net worth actually approaches $100,000. So knowing this, it has become extra important for me to spend my money in the Black community where it is needed, to make sure that our dollars circulate within our community many, many times before it exits our community. So given that Maulana Karenga's goal is that we exercise the principles of the Nguzo Saba every day of the year, not just in the 7 days between Christmas and New Year's, I really would encourage all of you to be very conscious of where you're spending your money and to circulate the money within the communities that most need it. So seek out the Black businesses, seek out the local businesses, spend your dollars there. And I would encourage all of us to make a commitment throughout all of 2022 to spend at least $30 a month in a Black business in Albuquerque. So UJIMA.
Through the principle of Nia, which translates as purpose. To make our collective vocation the building and developing of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness. Ernest Holmes, third step of affirmative prayer and spiritual mind treatment, we make real the reality of oneness through community building. So this very specific task Dr. Stephanie gave us gives us purpose in this practice of oneness, this actual collective vocation we share in building and developing the community we live in, the community of humanity that we belong to, with intention, with the purpose of making oneness real. So it is, we can get all wrapped up in what purpose means. But what if we got really specific and decided in 2022, my purpose is going to be to make oneness real. And I'm going to do that in these very specific ways in my life. Here are the choices I'm going to make. Here are the places I'm going to spend my dollars. Here is the way I'm going to educate myself about this reality that my beloveds are experiencing. And here's what I am going to do to meet my purpose of oneness about it. We go on to principle 6, which is Kumba and creativity. To do always as much as we can, in the way that we can, in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited it. Sounds like the next part of this how to do oneness, yes? Ernest Holmes says we should choose that which we wish to embody, and by constant attention to it, take on all its characteristics. Let us choose to be identified with power, with love and beauty, with peace and happiness. Let us identify ourselves with abundance and with success. The objective form to which we give our attention is created from the very attention to which we give it. So when we stay clear about our purpose of making oneness real, and doing so through the loving action of building community, we bring to it what we can, what we uniquely can. And we allow ourselves to stay in that place where we determine who and what we are by the truth of who and what we are as divine emanations of this holy blessed one. And when we do so, we bring to life our authentic and unique expression of that divinity with the purpose of making oneness real in our communities. Kumbha. We allow the creativity that Spirit is to move through us, making manifest the love and the peace and the harmony and the joy and the happiness that God is. And the final principle of Kwanzaa is IMANI, which translates as faith. To believe with all our heart in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. I have victory bolded in my notes. And I want to bold it because sometimes we get stuck in the righteousness of the struggle. And we want to just be all up in the struggle. This one over here, and that one over there, and this historical truth, and that reality is so hard. And we forget that we have already been victorious. We have already been victorious because we are here with breath in our bodies as the beloveds of the One. And when we stay grounded in that victory, the struggle ain't so struggly. Thank you, Jerry. And we have every right to acknowledge the ridiculousness over the history of humanity and all of the BS we have done. But that is not where we want to be spending our efforts and attention, really? Really? We get so caught up in the struggle, we get so caught up in what has gone wrong, that once again we have stopped unifying ourselves with the principle of oneness. We have stopped acknowledging the truth of who we are and determining for ourselves who that is. Now we're just back on that cycle, back on that rat race. Struggle, 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 more struggle. We just create more and more of it for ourselves instead of remembering we've already been victorious. Ernest Holmes says one should have faith in themselves, faith in their fellow human, in the universe, and in God. Because there's only one. If God is all there is, and the Holy Blessed One is the only creator of life, then we must have faith in all of it, even the ones we want to kick in the face, even the ones who have been woefully misguided, even the ones who have forgotten who they are. We must have faith in their holy nature. Which probably means I'll have to talk a lot about forgiveness this year, which I will. But when we say faith, IMANI, we are not talking about faith in some separate holy thing that is away from us, that has abandoned us to this drudgery we call life, the struggle we call life. It is right here. The faith we are asked to have has to be faith in what is, right here, right now, with all these humans. The ones we came from, the ones we are being, and the ones we have yet to birth. And gosh, if for no other reason, expand your concept of faith for them so that we may leave something a little better. Ernest Holmes goes on to say our mind must be steady in its conviction that our life is some part of God, and that the Spirit is incarnated in us. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. This is our work. This is our labor. May we each move forward from this moment, taking the wisdom of these 7 principles as a possible framework for how to practice oneness, for how to live the science of mind, for how to begin the work of having faith in the totality of the one, which includes everybody. Know this with me. Claim that holy yes for yourselves by anchoring it and saying out loud, Amen. Amen. And so it is.